Have you ever ignored a guy, intentionally or not, and wondered what really goes through his mind afterward? Not just the surface stuff, but the deep internal dialogue he's not telling anyone about. Here's the truth most people don't talk about. When you go silent, when you stop over-giving, when you stop chasing, it shakes him. Not because you're playing games, but because you've taken back your power. Suddenly, he's not in control anymore, and that realization changes everything. He starts questioning, did I mess this up? Did she meet someone else? Did I underestimate her? The woman he thought would always be there isn't anymore. And that creates a psychological discomfort he didn't expect. It forces him to confront your worth in your absence, to realize that you're not an option waiting on a shelf. He begins to see your silence not as coldness, but as confidence, boundaries, self-respect. And now the pressure is on. Will he rise to the occasion or let you go? What you do when you don't do anything might be the most powerful move you ever make. Let's break down what men actually think when you ignore them and why it changes the game entirely. When a woman pulls back, when she stops constantly texting, calling, checking in, showing up for a man who isn't really showing up for her, it hits differently. Men notice. And more importantly, they start to feel the shift. Suddenly she's not where she used to be. She's not giving her time away like it costs nothing. And that's when a man starts to think, wait, what just happened? That feeling, that confusion, that's the moment he realizes not in control anymore. You see, when someone always answers your texts, always makes themselves available, always gives without any hesitation, you start to expect it. You start to assume that access is permanent. That kind of certainty breeds comfort. And when a man gets too comfortable, when he feels like he's got your attention, no matter how little effort he puts in, he stops trying. He stops valuing what's always there. But the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop over-explaining yourself, stop trying to get him to see your worth, that's when the dynamic completely changes. It shifts from you being the one proving something to him realizing he's the one who might lose something. That realization is powerful because it creates a crack in the illusion that he's in the driver's seat. Suddenly, he's not so sure. He starts to wonder where you've gone, what you're thinking, and more importantly, who else might be capturing your attention. That silence you create, it speaks volumes. It's not passive aggression. It's not manipulation. It's space. And space makes people reflect. Space forces them to notice what they weren't noticing before. And here's where it gets interesting. When a man realizes he's no longer in control, he starts to reassess everything, not just who you are, but who he's been to you. He starts asking himself questions he wasn't asking before. Was I too cold? Did I ignore her needs? Did I take her for granted? That silence you created becomes a mirror. And for the first time, he's looking at himself in it. People value what they have to earn. That's not a game. That's human psychology. The moment something feels too available, we assume it will always be there. And that assumption, it kills desire. But when a woman steps back and says, with her actions, not her words, I won't keep showing up for someone who isn't showing up for me. That is not indifference. That is dignity. That is power. He may not say it out loud. He may not text you immediately or tell his friends what he's feeling. But inside, there's a spark of anxiety, a tension, a disruption to the comfort he was living in. And that tension is where attraction is reignited. That's where interest is born again. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you've stopped being easy to lose. It's in this space that a man realizes what is missing. Not just the texts, not just the attention, but the feeling of being chosen by someone. Incredible. And when he knows he might not be chosen anymore, he feels that loss before it's even final. That's where he starts to change his behavior, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Recognition of your value, recognition of your boundaries, recognition that this connection actually meant something. And he might be the one who let it slip. But here's what's key. Your decision to pull back has to be real. It can't be a tactic, because men can sense when it's fake. If you're still emotionally hooked, still waiting by the phone, still checking if he's viewed your stories, that's not truly stepping back. That's a performance. And people respond not to what you pretend to feel, but to what you actually embody. When you fully reclaim your energy, when you start living again for yourself, not in rebellion, not in revenge, but in self-respect, your presence changes. Your energy becomes less anxious, more grounded. And that version of you, that's the woman a man can't stop thinking about. Because she's not fighting to prove anything. She's already enough. And she's already moving forward. And so when you stop chasing, when you finally step back, not to teach him a lesson, but to honor your standards, he begins to think, she's different. I'm not in control anymore. And that thought, that's the first step to him asking the most important question of all. What do I need to do to step up and meet her there? Let him wonder. When you ignore a man, especially after you've been emotionally invested, something interesting happens. He starts thinking. And I don't mean surface level thinking like wondering what you're up to or checking if you've seen his Instagram story. I mean real internal reflection that most men don't often do when they feel comfortably pursued. Suddenly there's a silence where there used to be attention. There's a gap where there used to be affirmation. And that gap, it gets filled with doubt, curiosity, and questions he never had to ask himself before. One of the first things that goes through his mind is, wait, did I mess this up? And it's not always immediate. At first, he might just assume you're busy, or maybe he even tells himself he's fine with the distance. But when that silence lingers, when you don't double text, when you don't send the just checking in message, when you stop being emotionally available on demand, he starts to realize something's shifted. And that shift is powerful. Men don't always recognize value in the noise. They recognize it in the silence. When you're always there, always responsive, always accommodating, there's a risk he begins to take your presence for granted, not out of cruelty or malice, just out of comfort. We all do it to some extent. When something is always available, we stop questioning what life would be like without it. But the moment it's gone, or even temporarily out of reach, we're forced to confront the space it used to fill. So he starts rewinding. He plays back your last few conversations. He wonders, was she upset with something I said? Did I ignore something important? Did I misread how she was feeling? That question, did I mess this up, is crucial because now, for the first time in a long time, not just reacting, he's reflecting. This is when he starts to realize that your presence wasn't a given, that your energy, your attention, your warmth, it was a gift, and it wasn't guaranteed. And now that it's missing, he's left wondering if he did something to lose it. And here's the kicker. If he did mess up, the silence makes that mistake feel louder. Without the buffer of continued attention, the weight of what he may have done wrong hits a little harder. And that discomfort, that's growth. That's the space where real accountability can start to take shape, if he's capable of it. Now, not every man responds to that silence with maturity. Some will deflect. They'll try to convince themselves you're just being dramatic. They'll numb the discomfort by diving into distractions, ego boosts, or temporary attention from elsewhere. But even in those cases, even if he's not showing it, that question still lingers in the background. Because once a man has felt genuine connection, and once that connection goes quiet, he feels it. He might not say it out loud, but inside, he's questioning. There's a difference between ignoring someone to play games and creating distance because you're honoring your standards. You're not trying to make him change. You're just choosing not to overperform. And in doing that, you're forcing him to do something that emotional safety had previously allowed him to avoid: introspection. He thinks about the way he showed up, whether he made you feel heard, whether he made you feel chosen, whether he gave you reasons to stay or reasons to leave. And if he genuinely cares, if there was real emotion on his side, he'll sit with those questions longer than he'll ever admit. This is why your silence isn't just about space, it's about power. Not the manipulative kind, but the power that comes from self-respect. You're showing him that access to you is earned, not owed. That you're not going to keep giving energy to someone who isn't matching it. And whether or not he ends up coming back isn't even the point. The point is that your distance gave him the opportunity to ask himself the questions that your presence may have been protecting him from. And here's the beautiful paradox. The very act of pulling back, of choosing yourself, becomes the thing that most often wakes him up. Because the moment you stopped fighting for the connection, he had to decide whether he was willing to fight for it at all. And if he isn't, if the silence never prompts him to step forward, to reflect, to reach out with something real, then that silence didn't just distance you from him, it revealed the truth. Sometimes the answer isn't in the noise. It's in what happens when the noise stops. When a woman pulls away, when she stops replying with the same urgency or simply redirects her energy elsewhere, a powerful thought often enters a man's mind: she has options. And whether he says it out loud or not, trust me, he feels it. It's one of those realizations that doesn't need explanation, it just hits. Here's the thing, most people, men and women, like the idea of being someone's first choice. We like to feel that special sense of significance. But there's a difference between being valued and being needed for someone's self-worth. When a woman is always available, always replying instantly, always bending to fit into a guy's world, it subtly sends a message, whether she realizes it or not, that he's the center of her universe. And at first, that can feel flattering, but after a while it starts to feel a little too easy. Men don't say this out loud, but when something comes too easily, the mind begins to question the value of it. Not because the woman isn't valuable, far from it, but because when someone seems to have no boundaries, no filter for who gets their time, their attention, their love, it cheapens the perceived worth of those things. And that's where things start to shift. But the moment she steps back, the moment she redirects that same energy inward, maybe into her passions, her work, her friendships, something changes. Suddenly she's not just reacting to his rhythm, she's moving to her own. And that silence, that pause, that change in behavior triggers a primal thought in him. She's not waiting for me. She could be with someone else. She has options. And this isn't about jealousy. This isn't about playing games. This is about perceived value. When a man thinks she has options, he's acknowledging that you're not stuck on him, that your world doesn't collapse if he pulls away, that your life is rich and full with or without his presence in it. And that's deeply attractive, because what most people don't realize is that a sense of scarcity creates value. When your time isn't easily accessible, when your presence isn't guaranteed just because someone snaps their fingers, it makes someone pause. It forces them to think, what do I have to do to keep this person in my life? And when a woman ignores a man, not out of spite, not to punish, but simply because she has chosen herself, that absence becomes louder than any words she could have spoken. Her silence becomes a mirror. He starts to wonder, what is she doing? Who's she talking to? Has she moved on? He doesn't ask those questions when you're always there. He doesn't think about what he might lose when he thinks you'll always stay. But the minute you step back, you reclaim your power. You remind him, and maybe even remind yourself, that you're not just an option on his shelf waiting to be picked when it's convenient. You are someone with standards, someone who's not going to sit around hoping he figures it out. You are someone who values your peace more than constant confusion. And when he senses that, it shakes him in the best way, because now he has to work to deserve your time again. See, when you stop chasing, when you stop explaining, over-texting, over-giving, you're not just creating distance, you're creating clarity. And in that clarity, a man either steps up or fades out. And both answers are useful. But here's the beautiful twist. In doing this, you're not even doing it for him. You're not stepping back as some strategic move to get him to want you more. You're stepping back because your energy is too precious to spend on someone who isn't clear. And that shift, when it comes from a place of self-respect, not manipulation, is what truly changes everything. When a man believes you have options, it reminds him that being in your life is a privilege, not a guarantee. It reminds him that your love, your attention, your affection, they're not just up for grabs, they're earned. And most importantly, it reminds you that you don't need someone to see your value in order for it to exist. Your value doesn't rise or fall based on who decides to show up. It was always there. Sometimes you just needed a moment of silence to see it more clearly. Let him wonder. When you ignore a man, especially after showing up with openness, kindness, and emotional availability, something shifts. Now, I'm not talking about ignoring him to manipulate or ghosting to gain power. I'm talking about those moments when you pull back because you realize you've been giving too much and receiving too little. When you stop engaging out of self-respect, not strategy. That's when a man starts to see a version of you he didn't fully recognize before. He sees strength, and not just surface level strength, the kind that comes from putting on a brave face or pretending not to care. I'm talking about real strength, the kind that's rooted in self-worth. When you stop texting first, stop initiating plans, stop making excuses for his inconsistencies, that's when he realizes she's stronger than I thought. You see, a lot of people, men included, get used to a certain rhythm in relationships. Maybe you were always the one to bridge the distance after a disagreement. Maybe you constantly made emotional space for him, even when he wasn't showing up for you. That becomes comfortable. And whether consciously or not, he starts to rely on that. He leans on the idea that you'll always be there, always be the one who keeps things going. And when that pattern breaks, when you don't send that check-in message, don't respond right away, don't fight to be seen, that silence speaks. In that silence, he has to sit with the weight of your absence, not just physically, but emotionally. He has to notice what it feels like when you stop holding space for the connection. And that's uncomfortable for him, because suddenly he's not just dealing with the loss of your attention, he's confronting the reality that you didn't need him the way he thought you did, that you have a spine, that you have boundaries, that your kindness wasn't weakness, it was a choice. Now, some men will misread that strength. They'll say, she's being cold, or she's playing games. But deep down, they know the truth. They know that what they're really feeling is the shift in power, not the power of control, but the power of self-respect. You're not trying to hurt him. You're just done betraying yourself to keep someone interested. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. And here's the beautiful paradox. The moment you stop giving from an empty place, when you step back, not with bitterness, but with dignity, that's often when a man actually begins to value what he had. Because up until then, he may have confused your efforts with desperation. He may have thought your consistency came from need, not choice. But now he sees it differently. Now he sees that being with you isn't a guarantee, it's a privilege. You walking away or pulling back or simply not fighting for attention anymore, that hits a man in a place ego can't protect. Because ego wants to believe he's irreplaceable. That no matter how poorly he shows up, you'll still be there waiting. But when you walk away with grace, when you leave the door open without leaving yourself behind, he starts to ask deeper questions. Why didn't she chase? Why didn't she come back? Was I that easy to walk away from? And the answer isn't that he didn't matter, it's that you matter too. And you're not going to shrink just to be tolerated. You're not going to beg for crumbs when you know you're capable of a feast. That strength, that self-honoring energy, it forces a man to grow or go. And that's the point. You're not here to mother him into emotional maturity. You're not here to rescue someone who's not ready to meet you where you are. Your strength is the mirror that reflects where he truly stands. And sometimes that's the wake-up call. Now, does every man come running back? No. And that's okay. Because your silence isn't meant to provoke, it's meant to protect. It protects your energy, your peace, your dignity. And the right man, the one who's aligned with your value, he won't just admire your strength, he'll rise to meet it. You're not here to convince someone you're worth choosing. You're here to live in a way that reminds you every day you already are. You know, when a woman starts to pull away or go silent, there's always this moment where a man starts to question everything. Not because he's suddenly enlightened, but because her energy has shifted. And that shift is powerful. It's not just silence, it's a boundary. It's the unspoken, this is not working for me. And that creates a ripple effect he can't ignore. When a man realizes you're no longer texting first, no longer reaching out, no longer bending to accommodate his inconsistency or lack of effort, it catches him off guard, especially if he's been used to you showing up regardless of how he shows up. That space you create, it's where he starts to realize something important. He underestimated your boundaries. See, most people operate under the assumption that if someone cares, they'll always stay, they'll always try, always be available, always forgive. So when you step back, even subtly, it disrupts that pattern. You're no longer following the emotional script he expected. And that alone is a wake-up call. This doesn't mean you're punishing him. It doesn't mean you're playing games. It means you're honoring your standard. And that's something so many people are afraid to do because they think it will scare someone off. And yes, sometimes it will. But the only people it scares off are the ones who were never willing to meet you there to begin with. What really happens in his mind is this: he starts to notice the void, the effort he didn't make, the plans he didn't follow through on. The moments you gave your presence without him truly showing up, and suddenly the absence of your effort becomes deafening. That's the irony. While you were trying, while you were giving, while you were constantly showing up emotionally, he may not have fully appreciated it. But the moment you stop, he starts to feel everything he took for granted. There's this internal negotiation he goes through. Did I go too far? Did I misread her tolerance? Is she done with me? And this is where your silence isn't just a pause, it becomes a statement. It says, I don't fight for someone who doesn't value me. Not loudly, not with drama, but with clarity. That's what boundaries look like. They're not loud, they're not angry, they're clean, they're calm, they're powerful. When a man underestimates your boundaries, it's usually because they were never clearly demonstrated. Maybe you tolerated the flakiness. Maybe you forgave the mixed signals. Maybe you waited longer than you should have. And he got comfortable. He started believing that no matter how little he gave, you'd still be there. But the moment you go quiet, it creates a contrast that he wasn't ready for. It reminds him this woman is not here to prove her worth. She knows it. And that changes everything, because now the ball is in his court. But not in the usual sense. It's not, will he text back, or will he finally give me what I want? It becomes, is he capable of recognizing value and treating it accordingly? Because that's the true test. Not whether he misses you in your silence, but whether he respects your boundary and steps up, not just to regain your attention, but to meet your standard consistently. That's the difference between someone who wants you back and someone who's ready to deserve you. And let's be honest, not all of them will step up. Some will see your silence as a challenge to win. Some will text out of boredom or ego. But the ones who matter, the ones worth your time, they'll see your distance as a reflection of your worth. And it'll force them to ask the deeper question, why did she feel the need to walk away? That's when growth happens, for them and for you. Because this isn't just about what he thinks. It's about what you believe about yourself. When you stop explaining your worth and start enforcing it with action, not in anger, not in revenge, but in quiet, unwavering strength, you start attracting people who don't need constant reminders of how to treat you. You stop convincing, you stop chasing, and instead you become the standard they either rise to meet or fall away from. And the ones who underestimated your boundaries, they learn the hard way. Once a woman learns to walk with self-respect, she doesn't come back for breadcrumbs. That's the moment he realizes you're not ignoring him to punish him. You're protecting your peace. When you pull back, when you stop reaching out, stop initiating, stop overgiving, something powerful happens. It creates space. And in that space, a man is confronted with a question he can't avoid. Do I want to step up, or am I okay letting her go? Now, here's what most people miss. Silence is not a punishment, is not manipulation, it's clarity. It's the loudest way to say, I'm not chasing something that isn't meeting me halfway. When you stop trying to convince someone to choose you, you hand them the pen. You say, you write the next chapter, but I'm not waiting forever. And in that moment, a man starts to feel the absence of your energy, your support, your effort, your emotional investment. And trust me, he notices. The good morning texts aren't there anymore. The thoughtful check-ins, the laughs, the subtle encouragement, it's gone. And it doesn't matter how independent he is or how busy he claims to be. When your presence disappears, it leaves a gap. Now that gap, that silence, does one of two things. It either makes him realize what he had and how much he wants it back, or it shows on him that he was never really invested in the first place. Either way, your silence is a mirror. It reflects his true level of interest, not just what he says when things are easy, but what he does when he might actually lose you. That's where everything changes. You see, we're conditioned, especially women, to believe that love is proven through constant nurturing. That if you care, you keep trying, you fix, you over-communicate, you give more chances. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to let go of the rope and see if he reaches for it. Because real interest shows up when things get quiet, when the dynamic shifts, when he's no longer being chased. That's when the question gets asked inside his head. Am I willing to show up in the way she deserves? Or am I just enjoying the attention without offering anything real in return? And that's the test. Some men will realize in that silence, I've been passive. I've been coasting. I don't want to lose her. And they'll step up. They'll take action, not just words, not just I miss you, but actual effort. They'll show you, not just tell you, that they're willing to match your energy. Others won't. They'll fade out. They'll retreat into the background. And that, by the way, is a gift because it saves you from wasting another minute investing in someone who was never going to invest in you. But that choice has to be his. You can't force it. You can't drag someone to value you. And you shouldn't have to. Love, real love, need to be begged for. It's offered willingly from a place of recognition. I see your value and I want to meet you there. That's why this moment, this quiet moment when you've stepped back, is so revealing. Because it's no longer about words. It's not about how charming he can be, how much potential he has, how good the chemistry was in the beginning. It's about action. It's about what he does when he feels he might lose you. That's the only thing that tells you the truth. And I get it. Stepping back is hard. It's uncomfortable. There's a voice in your head saying, what if he forgets me? What if he moves on? What if I never hear from him again? But here's the truth. If your silence causes him to disappear, he was never truly there in the first place. That's why you have to stop tying your worth to someone's ability to stay. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is allow someone the space to choose and be at peace with whichever answer comes. Because you're not here to chase love. You're not here to audition for it. You're here to attract the love that is brave enough, present enough, and mature enough to recognize you when they see you. So when a man feels your absence and he's sitting with that question, do I want to step up or let her go? Understand this. His answer will reveal everything. And your silence, that was the catalyst that brought the truth to the surface. Let that be enough.